Notre Dame took care of business on Saturday against Army, and today we'll break down the biggest things we liked and didn't like from the win. Plus, was it impressive enough for the Irish to move up 2 spots in the next CFP rankings? That's all coming up on today's Locked On Irish.
You are Locked On Irish, your daily podcast on the Notre Dame Fighting Irish. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello and welcome in. This is Locked On Irish, your daily Notre Dame podcast. I'm your host, Tyler Wojciak. I graduated from Notre Dame in 2018, and now I'm a producer at Fox Sports. And I'm thrilled to have you here on Tuesday, November 26th. And thanks for starting your day right here by making this your first listen of the day. Quick reminder to hit that subscribe button on YouTube or wherever you're listening to the podcast. And this episode is brought to you by Gametime. Download the Gametime app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONCollege for $20 off your first purchase. It's Tuesday, which means we got my former co-host Luke Smith on the show today. In case you are new to the program, Luke and I used to do a show called Sons of Saturday Irish a few years back. And every week during the season, Luke and I break down the 3 things we liked and didn't like from Notre Dame's most recent game. In this case, the win over Army. Then we'll turn the page to the upcoming CFP rankings that come out later tonight and predict where the Irish will end up. After Indiana fell to Ohio State, everyone expects Notre Dame to move up at least 1 spot, but could they jump Penn State as well? After the Nittany Lions struggled on the road against Minnesota, we discussed that, plus some of our early impressions of Notre Dame's upcoming matchup with arch rival USC on Saturday. Check it out. Luke Smith is back with me here, fresh off a trip to New York City, and even though I am well aware that getting into Yankee Stadium was an issue for you and seemingly everybody else who was in attendance, once you finally made your way inside, what was the atmosphere like for Notre Dame's demolition of Army?
Well, it's kind of funny, actually, because when I did finally get in, they had the girl that does the in-game entertainment for home games like up there, and the first thing I hear her say is, like, ladies and gentlemen, it is a sellout tonight, and you look around and literally half the seats aren't full yet because there's 40,000 people outside. So that was kind of funny, but like it was okay. And actually, that's like kind of the first thing I was going to get into about what was good about this game was really like there was just no doubt left at all. We'll get to the nightmare that was getting into that stadium, but this is what I'll say. I missed the first series, still trying to get in. Once I finally got in, I get up to the 200 level. First play I see is a 12-yard completion to Greathouse. Next play is a 9-yard run by Love. Next play is a 28-yard touchdown pass to Faison. So then I start walking to my seats. I still had a little bit ways to go up there. Run into somebody, talk to them, then get over to my section, run into another group of friends. And as I'm looking to go down the steps to hit my seats, Bryce Young blocks a punt. We're set up at the Army 7-yard line. Jeremiah Love goes vertical 3 plays later, and it's 14-0 basically as I'm sitting down. The game was over 14 plays into the game, and that was just huge.
Yeah, that was really nice to see that there's no sweating this one out. And every once in a while when you play a service academy, sometimes it can be a little tricky at first, especially going up against a pretty good Army team, but Notre Dame just left no doubt from the very beginning of the game. Very grateful for that. I'll get into the things that I liked. My first thing, explosiveness on offense. You talked about that touchdown to Faison to start the game. This, as a whole, has kind of been a concern of mine all season long as it pertains to how Notre Dame stacks up against some of the best teams. I'd like to see a little bit more explosiveness in the passing game, but they still connected on 2 plays of 25 or more yards in this one, despite only attempting 18 passes. Jeremiah Love had another long touchdown run, this time a 68-yard house call, untouched. He averaged 18 yards per carry, which is the definition of explosiveness. Plus, Aeneas Williams joined the fun with a nice 58-yard touchdown run. Didn't really expect to see that from him, but the offense needed to take a big step forward in this game, and they did, and they were explosive throughout the game.
Yeah, and I think that's a good point, particularly on the explosiveness through the air, because that isn't something that we've seen a whole lot of. But like I do have to say, Pete Sampson tweeted this out a couple hours ago. Jeremiah Love has 6 30-yard runs this year. Georgia as a team has 4. Oregon has 3. Like that's pretty significant.
It really is. And I understand that people get frustrated with the amount of carries he gets, but when he does touch the ball, like if he just breaks off a long run every time, exactly, that's going to limit some of his carries.
Yeah. I mean, when you look at the stat line, right, of 130 yards on 7 carries and 2 touchdowns, and then he touched the ball in the air one more time and got in the end zone. Like he touched the ball 8 times and got in the end zone on 3 of them. That's pretty ridiculous.
Yeah, and I know that during the NIU game, a big thing coming out of that was Jeremiah Love needs the ball more. Well, when you're just beating the crap out of teams, I don't mind that Jeremiah Love isn't getting hit that often, especially considering the amount of injuries this team has suffered all year. Like, keep Love as fresh as humanly possible, especially this late in the season.
Absolutely.
All right, what's up next for you?
So I want to give a brief acknowledgement to Jaden Osbury as well. He was just really all over the field, second on the team in tackles with 7. He's been really solid all year, and he's likely going to have to play a bigger role next week with the news coming out of Marcus Freeman's presser day that Kingston Viliamu-Asa will miss USC game with a sprained knee. Hopefully it's just the USC game, but he's going to have to play a bigger role in all likelihood, and I think he's well equipped to do it, but a really good showing from him Saturday night.
On one hand, it's good that the KVA injury is limited to just a sprained knee, but that leaves a lot to the imagination because I don't know what the recovery timeline is for that. He only played 6 plays in this game, but to your point, Jaden Osbury stepped in and showed out throughout this game. And that actually leads me to my next thing because I think he really set the tone in this regard. So before the game, Marcus Freeman was asked what he wanted to see from his team, and Freeman chose violence. That's what he said he wanted to see, and this defense was violent all game long. We've really been talking about this all year long, how they just hit people with reckless abandon, and this is just an extremely violent group. It's hard to really quantify it because there's no stat that really determines how many hard hits you have a game. But when you watch this team and you watch the beating that they put on the opposition, it really does stand out. And it's not really something that we've been accustomed to throughout our lives when watching Notre Dame defenses. But Jaden Osbury set the tone immediately with a big violent hit early on in the game, and he continued that throughout the rest of the game. And this is just a really, really good defense and a particularly violent one as well.
It is, and I think that first thing you think of when you see that clip from Freeman saying that is the clip from Kirby Smart in the national title game the other year when they asked him what he wanted to see, and he said aggression. And I think that there's been a lot of conversation about how Freeman has seemed different since the Northern Illinois game and just not really satisfied with anything that has happened, trying to keep himself more level. And I think that was another instance of that and kind of being that sort of coach as opposed to letting himself get too high or too low. And as somebody pointed out to me, if you were still slinging merch like you were at one point in time back in Sons of Saturday, that would be a pretty good t-shirt with Freeman's face on it and just says violence on it. So somebody might have already done that, but just throwing it out there, that's not a bad t-shirt idea if anybody's listening to this.
It does seem kind of like a ripoff of that Kirby Smart quote. I remember where I was watching that game, and as soon as I saw that, I immediately pulled up the app and was like, how do I bet everything I possibly can on Georgia in this game against TCU? It's like, how much are you comfortable winning after seeing that quote? Because he just said aggression. And then there was a brief moment of silence between him and the sideline reporter, and you knew exactly what was going to happen on that field. And it went out pretty much just like you expected after a comment like that.
Yeah, it did. Yeah.
But also with Freeman, this is a good contrast to where he was earlier in the season when before the Miami-Ohio game, he's like, they're going to dictate terms. This is a really good team. We're just going to try to keep this in control. And it's like, dude, what are you talking about? This is Miami-Ohio. So I'm really glad he's changed in that regard. It seems like that mindset has translated to the rest of this team.
Yeah, I think it has. And speaking of, actually, the last thing I wanted to touch on is Christian Gray, because I thought that he played with the physicality and an edge that had been missing in recent weeks. And the fact that he was doing that, to me, that's a sign that his shoulder injury has healed up. I was really impressed with his play on Saturday night. It honestly, it kind of looked like Army was maybe even targeting him in the run because they didn't expect him to go up and meet with violence or aggression, but that's exactly what he was doing. And Notre Dame's going to continue to need him to do that next week and in the playoffs. So that was really good to see as well.
I thought that was pretty interesting. I know that our buddy Greg Famung mentioned something along those lines on Twitter as well, that it seemed like Army was trying to target Christian Gray. Don't you find that interesting that Notre Dame has a true freshman corner in Leonard Moore that has really only played a few college football games in his career, and they were still willing to go to the guy with one more year of experience at Christian Gray? It didn't work out for him, but the fact that they even tried to do that, knowing that a true freshman was on the other side, I think also says a lot about Leonard Moore.
Now, I'm pulling this up here, or trying to, because now, granted, the numbers were not always that easy to see, and I'll get into that later. But I didn't think we saw a lot of Leonard Moore in this game.
Yeah, Leonard Moore was only out there for 20 plays. Also, Carson Hobbs played a decent amount, 17 plays. Now, a lot of those came there at the end. But Army was never going to try to pass in this one. They were dead last in pass yards per game, but a nice little wrinkle for this defense going up against a different style of triple option.
Absolutely. And yeah, watching Army's offense was not fun at all. Just poor Bryson Daly, almost like kind of like a delayed draw half the time is what it seemed like he was doing. He kind of like the way I was thinking of it in the moment was like, this is the slow mesh, except he's never going to throw it, because he would basically just sit back there, see if his guys could get any push. They couldn't. And then he'd just start running. And I know that like people wanted to give Jeff Monken some credit, like saying like, all our guys are going to be commissioned officers. Like we're going to play to the whistle. Like, I still think that was insanely stupid of him. And like, that answer, like, doesn't sway me at all. Like, you should have pulled him out of that game. Losing by 42, instead of 35. Like, what's really the difference there, man? I just thought that was kind of weak. But anyways,
they signed up for 60.
Yeah.
Bryson Daly had 39 carries in this one. I think
That's malpractice.
39 violent hits.
Yeah.
I was actually pretty surprised. I watched his post-game press conference, and he seemed okay. Credit to him, man.
Yeah.
I would need to just be in a bathtub full of ice for at least a couple hours after a game like that. But he managed to handle it pretty well. I already talked about it in yesterday's show. I thought it was pretty cool of him. He would get drilled and he'd get up and he'd start talking to the defense. And I'm like, honestly, respect, brother, because there is no way you're having a lot of fun out there. But
no,
you keep getting back up almost like a tackling dummy or a crash car dummy.
Yeah, right.
Last thing I liked before we moved on to what we didn't like, even though there's not a ton there, Riley Leonard's improvement overall. He was 10 of 13 passing for 148 yards and 2 touchdowns and basically 2.5 quarters of play. He wasn't out there. The stat sheet isn't obviously going to blow you away, but he was really aggressive throwing the ball downfield, and that was the most confident he's looked in a while, especially stepping up and stepping into his throws. He was accurate, and I saw some fans who were critical of him online because his ball to Jordan Faison was like a hair late, and at this point, I just kind of throw my hands up at the situation. It's totally fair to be critical of how Riley Leonard has played at times this year, but some of the nitpicking just isn't fair. I don't really know why this is happening because I thought that was a really good game by him. And if you're a fan out there just looking for reasons to get upset, then I guess you'll find one way or another. But Riley Leonard is a good quarterback, and he's playing really, really well right now at a time when they really need him.
Yeah, and to be clear, it is still happening. I mean, the people behind me, like Riley Leonard loses a yard on a play near the goal line, and it's like, stop doing stupid things. It's like, I don't really know that one is so much on him that the O-line gets blown up. Now, I will say I would like to see him going away from looking for like the basketball player of just like trying to brace for contact on an and one when he just goes vertical up in the air like that. But yeah, there's still like Notre Dame fans can't help themselves. They just want to rip on this guy any chance they get. And there aren't a lot of opportunities to do that many games anymore. So it still happens, but whatever. I don't know if we're shaking that one.
Yeah, I don't think we're shaking it. Maybe that's kind of the reason why every time he does something good, I feel obligated to mention it because it's not like he needs a team of supporters or anything like that, but I'm happy to defend him at this point in this season. Luke will be right back here with us in a second to break down what we didn't like from the game, including his nightmarish experience trying to get into Yankee Stadium. But first, a word from Gametime. Whether it be sports, concerts, comedy shows, you name it, I love going to live events. And Gametime is a new feature called Gametime Picks that makes getting tickets for your favorite live events even easier. Gametime Picks filters out the fluff to show you incredible deals on great seats, so you don't have to waste time searching through thousands of tickets. If you're interested in going to the Notre Dame USC game on Saturday, if you're out here in Los Angeles, or you're making the trip, Gametime is the perfect place for you. My favorite thing about the app is you get a panoramic view from your seat in the app before you buy, and then you can buy tickets in seconds with just 2 taps. Take the guesswork out of buying tickets with Gametime. Download the Gametime app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONCollege for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account and redeem code LOCKEDONCollege for $20 off. Download the Gametime app today. What time is it? Game time. All right, let's move on to the things that we didn't like. Again, Notre Dame dominated this one. Not much to not like, but it's time to discuss getting in to Yankee Stadium because it's not just you. I've seen it a lot on social media, and I've seen some of the pictures and videos. It's shocking for me to look at as someone who was not there. So take us through your troublesome experience getting into Yankee Stadium.
Yeah, I mean, and maybe I'll just like broaden it out to the Yankee Stadium experience in general. Like, as you kind of remember, I know you were there in 2018. there isn't a lot around the stadium there. There's a handful of bars. Now, two of them are pretty big. However, this year, like, I think the bar owners kind of made a mistake that Billy's bar, like, a lot of it was rented out. And so then you had to buy like a skip the line ticket in order to try to get in there. And like that thing sold out halfway through the day. So I didn't even end up going really to the area around Yankee Stadium before the game. I stayed in Manhattan most of the day at different bars. And then I got off the train in the Bronx at 6 p.m., got in line at 6:04 once I figured out like which line I could get into. And I did not get in until probably 7:23, I think was the time. It took over an hour, and there were like 4 gates that were open. At each gate, you had one metal detector, which doesn't make any sense. Also, the metal detectors didn't appear to be doing anything because they were going off left and right. Nobody was stopping anybody. You kind of felt herded in like cattle, where you had these weird barricades. And you're kind of like just packed in like sardines with people. Some people are starting to get frustrated. Like, I actually think the crowd did a pretty good job of keeping its patience, because like that could have been scary and ugly, and it wasn't. And I just don't know how you're not better prepared for that. This isn't the first time a football game has been played there. I don't think there's any reason to go back there. I do remember people complaining about this in 2018. I just didn't experience it myself then. This time, though, I was not so lucky. And like I said, like I got there an hour before the game and I missed the first series. Like, how does that happen?
That's insane. And I actually do not remember dealing with anything like that back in 2018, but I think we went in super early for that game. I didn't really enjoy the experience at Yankee Stadium. It's cool. I understand the history and this specific event being the 100th year anniversary of the Four Horsemen, but there's really not that many good seats.
No.
I was somehow convinced to pay a little bit extra for that game. I ended up being on the lower level, and it sucked because we were like behind the Notre Dame bench. They're all standing up. We're at a pretty far distance. You could barely see the field. So again, understand the history. Let's not do that. Or really, any baseball stadium. I wasn't at that game at Fenway back in 2015. Didn't seem like there were a ton of fans about that one either. So I think we're pretty much good on football and baseball stadiums.
Yeah, I would agree. And I would say, like, I actually got lucky. Like, the seats I had were good. We were in the bleachers, but, like, I guess it was maybe, like, a little bit elevated, so it was kind of like the corner of the end zone. So I actually thought those seats were pretty good, but you're right. There weren't a ton of great vantage points in the stadium otherwise.
As for me, the one thing that I really didn't like from this game, I already ranted about it yesterday. I've given up on the kicking game. It's bad. I don't think it's getting any better this season. So at this point, Notre Dame just needs to hold out hope that they don't ever be put into a situation where they're going to have to rely on a field goal kicker to tie a game, win the game, extend the lead, or anything like that, because I don't know what the deal is with Mitch Jeter's health. I believe Marcus Freeman when he says that Mitch Jeter is the best option, but it's just been a really tough go for him lately, and it's too bad because he started off the season so well with a 3-for-3 game against Texas A&M. He was critical for the Irish in that performance. They have not really needed him since, with the exception of that NIU game. One of those was blocked. One was a terrible decision to kick it in the first place, but they better hope that they don't need him again, because I don't have any faith it's going to work out.
Yeah, it's ugly. There's no doubt about it, and I hope they don't need him this weekend against USC. You can hope that maybe a couple weeks off gives him enough time, but I just fear that they really screwed him by having him kick the opening kickoff back in that Georgia Tech game when he clearly wasn't healthy. And then he had to be taken out of the game, and he's just never really been the same since. So I think they kind of did this themselves, unfortunately, and that's where they are, because you're right. There's no reason to have any faith in it right now.
Do you have anything else you didn't like from the actual game?
Not the actual game. The only thing I will say is, like, I liked the colors of the jerseys, but it was really hard to see, like you couldn't see the numbers at all in the stadium. And they were just too shiny. I think we could have done a better job with that, because like half the time you couldn't tell which running back was out there. And like, just like what receivers were out there. So that was kind of frustrating, but that's pretty much it. There's not a lot else for me to nitpick on.
Yeah, and it was hard to see on TV as well, because I thought the jerseys looked really clean. These are one of the better Shamrock Series uniforms. And then you see it live during the game, and you're like, oh, I can't really tell. It was particularly tough on defense. Like, you got a huge scrum with the triple option, and it's really hard to decipher who's who out there. But, yeah, I think this was a good lesson with the Shamrock Series uniforms overall. They look great on jerseys, and I thought, like, the merchandise around the Shamrock Series is really good. But just a little note for future Shamrock Series games. Last thing I didn't like, I don't like playing two service academies in 1 year. Respect to Army for the work that they've done this season. They're a good service academy. They're undefeated for reasons. But that was a ranked opponent. Technically, it certainly didn't feel like it at all, and it's not going to be talked about as if it were a highly rated opponent because they are still Army. Notre Dame did what they had to do. They dominated them, but considering we have to play Navy every single year, I'm good with that being the only service academy game Notre Dame plays all season. And if they are going to play Army, maybe they have time to maybe punt a year on Navy, even though we both know that's never going to happen. So that's all I have to say. Credit to Army. Let's never do it again.
Totally agreed. And to be fair, we can blame Miami for this, for dumping this game. And it is kind of funny thinking back on, like, Army wouldn't agree to this game for a long time. Jeff Monken didn't want to play it because they had just joined this new conference. Well, he might have been right about not wanting to play Notre Dame, and he kind of said something to that effect, like, thank God we don't have to play these guys every year. He might have been wrong about their conference because, man, how god-awful is the AAC if this is an undefeated team in that conference?
Not only undefeated, they were winning every game by at least
Whipping
3 touchdowns.
people.
Yeah. But Monken knew. You could kind of tell at his press conference before the game that he knew that they really had it up against them in this one, and Notre Dame certainly delivered. But now that Notre Dame does have a ranked win, albeit against Army, I'm going to be very interested to see how the College Football Playoff Committee is going to value that win because Notre Dame absolutely hammered them. They were ranked in their own rankings, but it is a service academy. So are they going to dismiss it? I don't really know. So where do you expect the Irish to land in the CFP rankings that come out later tonight?
I think they'll be at 5th, so just moving up a spot with Indiana losing. I think they have a case to be ahead of Penn State, but I don't think that's going to happen. Man, Penn State should have lost that game this past week. Just not a very good football team, if you ask me, but whatever. They'll get exposed in the playoff and not have to do anything all year to make the playoff, but that's neither here nor there. I'm going with Oregon, Ohio State, Texas, Penn State, Notre Dame, followed by Georgia, Miami, Tennessee, SMU, Boise, ASU, and then IU at 12. So I'm keeping them in the field for now. I don't know how long that's going to – I don't know where they're going to land, actually. I'm very curious to see what the committee does with Indiana. But I got Notre Dame at 5th.
That's okay. So to be clear, these are what we expect from the CFP, not necessarily our top 12.
Correct. Yeah. If you were asking me, I would have both those SEC teams above Miami. And I would probably have – as I was going through this exercise, like the back end of this 12, it's kind of like, who cares? Like, I don't think any of these teams are very good. Like Indiana, Arizona State, Boise. But like, I also don't think Clemson or South Carolina deserves a chance. Like, South Carolina can't move the ball offensively. And Clemson, anytime they played somebody with a pulse, they've just gotten the brakes beaten off them. So I don't think they deserve a shot at this.
Boise snuck by Wyoming this past weekend. They won 17-13.
They've been kind of playing the Miami game the last few weeks.
They have. They've been playing a dangerous game. It might catch up to them before the season's end. But did you catch any of that Texas-Kentucky game during the middle of the day?
No, I did not.
So that was a weird one because Texas went up pretty big early on. Kentucky made a switch at quarterback. They benched Brock Vandegrift to go with their true freshman. I believe his name is Cutter, and he's from Kentucky. So that's a great
Cutter Boley.
Yeah, great name for a Kentucky quarterback. Quinn Ewers gets hurt, but they kept him in because it was his last home game, and I felt like they wanted to give him, a nice little send-off. But it was clear that the offense had changed. They started running the ball a lot more. Kentucky ended up covering that game. They were, I think, 18.5-point dogs. I was with a bunch of Kentucky Wildcats fans at the time, so we were pretty locked into this game. A lot of us were back at the Cats plus 18.5. And I am going to be very interested to see what they do at quarterback in this game against Texas A&M because they just did not look that good. I understand the sentiment with it being his last home game, but Texas has also been playing a weird game where they haven't really looked that great, particularly on offense. That defense is still very good. They struggled a bit against Arkansas. That game was still in jeopardy in the fourth quarter. They were never really in danger of losing this game to Kentucky, but that second half was a little bit unsettling. They're going to go up against Texas A&M in a huge, huge game this weekend, and even though Texas A&M just lost, you could throw out the records in this one. I think Notre Dame is going to be at 5 in this rankings, but I think they have a decent case to be 3rd, which seems crazy. It won't happen, but I think there's at least an argument to be made that they could be in that 3 spot.
Yeah, for sure. I don't disagree with you, and I've kind of always thought that A&M was going to win that Texas game, and now I especially think even if it is Arch Manning, right? Like I think A&M's going to win that game at home, especially coming off this just terrible loss to Auburn. I feel pretty good about them winning that football game, so that'll be interesting to see how that all shakes out. Like there could be a world where you have a 3-loss SEC, not champion, but definitely runner up. Like I'm really curious to see what happens there. Like maybe these teams aren't that good. I'm sorry, maybe they aren't.
I don't know who's good.
Yeah,
Oregon.
I think Notre Dame's pretty good. I think Ohio State's pretty good, and I think Ohio State will
really
probably beat Oregon in the Big Ten title game. But they lost to them once. So, that's head-to-head matters. But we'll see what happens.
Before Luke and I share some of our initial thoughts about Notre Dame's upcoming game against USC, I want to tell you about a great new promotion from our friends at FanDuel. Get ready to tackle the NFL action with America's #1 sportsbook, because right now, new customers can bet $5 to get $150 in bonus bets if you win. The FanDuel Sportsbook app gives you everything you need to place live bets on the NFL all in one place. So when you get a hunch in the middle of the game, you can check out the latest stats, view live play-by-play, and so much more on the same page where you place your bets. Just visit FanDuel.com to join today, and you will get started with $150 in bonus bets if you win your first $5 bet. If you're looking for a winner with that first $5 bet, I've got one for you today. So many great games to choose from this week in the NFL, especially on Thanksgiving. I'm going to take the Lions minus 10.5 against the Bears. I know that's a lot of points, but the Lions are the hottest team in football, and the Bears are quite literally the opposite. And for more, just visit FanDuel.com, and never waste a hunch and make every moment more with FanDuel, an official sportsbook partner of the NFL. That Oregon-Ohio State game should be really good. Now, Ohio State obviously has to handle business this weekend against Michigan. If they somehow lose that game, what's the spread on that, actually? I've not looked at that yet.
It opened at like 24.
That's crazy. Even for a game against Michigan.
And was like, holy cow.
Because even during some of the down years of Michigan when Ohio State was rolling them, it's at 21 right now. Wow.
Okay. That's a lot.
Then again, Michigan can't move the ball, though.
Well, they put up 50 this week against Northwestern.
That's
the Bryce
true.
Underwood bump. But
that's true.
I don't know.
Still, I don't think they're going to be able to move the ball on that Ohio State defense. I mean, they just completely shut down IU, 151 total yards of offense. So I think Ohio State, definitively good. Oregon, definitively good. In the SEC, I mean, I think Georgia's good, but who
they
knows,
got lucky that everything happened this week, because, people were sleeping on the fact that they were in a 31-21 ball game with UMass in the third quarter.
Yeah, and I know that SEC folk will just say, oh, they didn't care. It's like, okay, well, like, maybe they should care. I don't know, because they haven't played well enough this season to convince anyone that they're like one of those elite Georgia teams. So Notre Dame is in a great spot right now. I think they really, really need to get up to that 6th seed, assuming Ohio State and Oregon, it remains chalk there. I feel like the loser of that game, whoever it may be, will still end up at the 5 seed. But if Notre Dame could creep up to the 6, they'll be in that 6-11 matchup and then potentially play the winner of the ACC, most likely in the second round if they were to win that game. That would be a great spot for Notre Dame to be in, but they obviously need to handle business this upcoming weekend against USC. So what are some of your early impressions for that one?
So I think the only reservations I have are just like about historically the fact that Notre Dame really hasn't played very well out in LA, particularly in our lifetime, but really dating back to, the early 90s. I think the last time they beat a ranked SC team out there was 92. I think you and I did a show with Greg Flamong earlier this year where that's what he said. I don't know when the last time they blew SC out there was. Like, I really couldn't
last
tell
time
you.
Was 2000. They won by 17. It was like 38-21. But even then, it's like
it's been a while. The thing is, though, I did watch the USC UCLA game the other night, and it was ugly. I was not impressed with Jaden Mayava, and they were down in that game for most of it, and then scored a late touchdown, won 17-13. But I was not super impressed. What's super interesting to me is just like kind of seeing how poor of a year Zachariah Branch has had for them. I thought that guy was going to be like the next sort of like Notre Dame killer, and I better start knocking on somebody because maybe he still could be on Saturday. But I think it's likely he hits the portal after this year, based on what we've heard. And so just like I can't imagine there's going to be a lot of people at this game, to be honest. Like, you're going to be there, but I don't think there's going to be a lot of SC fans. Do you?
I was so annoyed that they moved the game up to 12:30 local. I do think that's going to affect the attendance in this one because it's an early day on Saturday. My guess is there's always going to be a good amount of Notre Dame fans at this game. I'm sure that's going to be the case with the fact that a playoff spot is on the line. I was really hoping that if USC lost to UCLA, pretty much everyone would just give up on the season, USC players included. The fact that they won that game might give them a little bit more juice. Maybe there'll be some more fans there, but I'm not expecting like a raucous environment. The stakes are just going to be so high, and the pressure is just going to be so intense on the Notre Dame side, given the win and you're in nature of the college football playoff.
Yeah, that's fair. I mean, but I guess I don't see what the big difference is between 6-6 and 7-5. They've actually, maybe it's even better that they won the game because now they're not playing for bowl eligibility. But I don't know. Maybe I'm wrong on that. I do think though Notre Dame should probably do what it's kept on doing the last few weeks and probably win this game by 17, 20 points. So we'll see.
The one thing that's given me confidence in this game is I don't think Mayava is going to be able to score. Like, you got a guy who's making, his third start with this team. I know he played a lot at UNLV, obviously, before he transferred, but there's just no reason to think that teams are going to be able to score on this Notre Dame defense. So as long as the offense takes care of business, and I understand that this USC defense is much improved with Danton Lynn as the defensive coordinator, I think Notre Dame is going to win. I think they're going to cover. I saw the spread's already moved up. It opened at 6.5. It's at 7.5 now. Everyone is going to be on Notre Dame, which I don't love. Don't love when the public is on Notre Dame's side, but to their credit, they have covered like 2/3 of all their games played over the past couple of years under Marcus Freeman. So I think they'll win. I ultimately think they'll cover, but I think it's going to be the first time that we experience any real game pressure with this team in a really long time.
Yeah, that could be. But I guess we'll see. I don't really think that. I just having watched that game the other night, I was so unimpressed. I kind of think this one not really that close, and we're in command throughout.
What was it about it, though? Was it just the quarterback play, the lack of explosiveness on offense?
I mean, they had 9 points until there were like 7 or 8 minutes left in the game.
Yeah, so if that's the case, I mean, they only had 91 rushing yards. I don't know what Lincoln Riley's deal has been this year. It feels like they have a great back, and Woody Marks, they just don't really give him the ball.
Right.
They've been trying to figure it out through the air. I don't know, maybe Lincoln Riley is still embarrassed after what Al Golden did to him, Caleb Williams, in that offense last year. Maybe he'll have something dialed up in this game. But they made that quarterback change, and I thought it was really interesting time. I guess Miller Moss isn't the future of this program. But I'm interested by that point about Zachariah Branch. Did you hear that he's looking elsewhere potentially?
I mean, just it sounds like he's had a really frustrating year. I would imagine he's not around next year.
Well, I hope that's the case because he was really good against Notre Dame last year. He had that big punt return, and every time he touches the ball, it just feels like he's a big play waiting to happen. So, Luke, it's been a blast. Next Tuesday, we'll have you back here and hopefully a college football playoff to talk about.
Yeah, bit of a role reversal. You'll be the one boots on the grounds, but looking forward to hearing about it next week and hopefully talking about who we might play in the playoffs. So let's do it.
All right, that's a wrap for this episode. Thanks again for making Locked On Irish your first listen of the day. Make sure you tune in tomorrow morning for my reaction to the latest CFP rankings, as well as my full preview of the upcoming game against USC. Then on Thanksgiving, I'm going to be right back here with another episode to get you through the rest of the week. Going to have a special guest on for that, so make sure you tune in. The best way to stay up to date with everything over here on the show is to subscribe on YouTube or wherever you're listening to the podcast. Also, give this video a like if you're watching on YouTube, or rate the show 5 stars and leave a review on your preferred podcast platform, and I will see you tomorrow.